Buenos tardes and good afternoon from Puerto, the most glamorous marina here on the island of Mallorca, where the fleet of 9 TP-52s are rearing to go for the second day of racing of the Puerto 52 Super Series Sailing Week. With difficult winds on the Bay of Palma yesterday, only one race was completed for the opening day. The standings for that race showed the Swedish team Ron Racing, the winners of the most recent event in Puerto Cervo, out on top. In second, the British-flagged Allegre, then the Italians on Azura in third. Fourth was Quantum Racing, followed by Platoon and Preveza. Brunellasek Gazprom, with new tactician Ray Davies on board, straight from winning the America's Cup, had a tough race but crawled back to seventh after being in the lead in a race that was abandoned. Rounding out the fleet were Sled and Gladiator. Yesterday, though, was a northwesterly. Today's forecast is calling for a southeasterly out on the Bay of Palma. I'm Jenny Tulloch here in the studio, but on the water, on the bay, we have the voice of TP-52 Super Series, Andy Robertson. Andy, how are the conditions shaping up for day two?
The conditions are shaping up pretty well, really. The only difference is compared to our forecast was generally from the northwest, so much the same as yesterday. But instead, we're in a light sea breeze, which does appear to be building. When we came on the water, it was only 5 or 6 knots, probably 8, 9 as we come into or well inside the start sequence. A little bit of chop on the start line, worth considering in this light breeze. But for all the world, it's a sea breeze situation. You'd imagine generally the left does tend to be on this bay, but anything could happen today, as happened yesterday.
Andy, which side of the race course do you like right now? We're just now 2 minutes to go to the start. So where do you think the best teams are going to be setting up?
I think in general we tend to like the left side, but let's watch and see. At the moment, Vasco Vascoso seems to be liking the right. Certainly Azura are up there at the towards the committee boat end of the line. So too Platoon. Then it's Jordi Calafat as a strategist there. And he, of course, grew up in the Bay of Palma and is America's Cup and Olympic gold medalist and knows the bay as well as anyone. Nobody really setting up immediately for the pin. I think we'll see Preveza, Tony Ray and Peter Holmberg thinking about it just now, certainly starting to protect the left runway to the pin end. They have Ran Racing above them. Quantum Racing up there towards the right, towards the committee boat. So too Brunellasek. Allegre going round the back of the line-up along with Sled, just looking to tack in to windward of Quantum, I think. So the fleet's starting to move forward. As I said, Preveza gunning for the pin end along with Ran Racing. Gladiator just above them, half a boat length back. And a nice setup just now from Azura. Azura have got just a little bit of runway to leeward, although Ed Baird and Gladiator just closing that down progressively. And of course, as these two boats rise up to Azura, that opens the door for Preveza, giving them more space. And the windward end is Brunellasek. Azura coming forward very quickly. Bow comes down. Just into the final seconds now before the gun. Azura looking well forward on the fleet. Nice start from them if it's clear. Slow. But a nice one off the pin end for Preveza. Preveza get the pin. Got pace on the boat to weather, which is Ran Racing. And unfortunately, Gladiator hurt by Ran on the start. Ran right up and squeezing up, killing off the Gladiator. We're going to have to attack off the next few seconds. We can see the bow of Quantum nicely forward in the end on Azura. Quantum have got some height, got some good pace. But for me, the best start just now is Preveza.
Yeah, I think Andy, the virtual eye, is agreeing with you on that one.
Of the fleet, and moving forward with pace on yesterday's winner, Ran Racing. Brunellasek not too bad, although they do have a Sled just below them. And Allegre above them, and Gladiator having to take stern. And a poor start as well for Platoon. Platoon forced to go out to the right. There's a look in the virtual immediately, Jim.
I think you nailed that one. We had right off the starting line Provezza with the lead over Quantum, currently in second, and then Azura of Ron Racing very, very close in this fight for third place. I think up at the boat end of the line, it looked like Brennanasek was so very, very close to being over for us, at least from virtual. You could see them bear away at about 3 seconds and kind of run down the line a little bit. So I think they ran out of their runway, and just to leeward of them, they've got sled. So I'm assuming Brennanasek not quite that happy with where their positioning is. They might have to tack off.
Indeed.
Yeah.
They're just about to do that. The bows just come down to build a bit of pace and get some separation from Allegri, who are above them. But Brennanasek a really tough position just now. Slowed, bow down, just getting that separation. Now they tack behind Allegri. They'll also go behind Gladiator. So,
we've just lost the signal from Andy Robertson just a tiny bit there, but as you could hear him saying, Brennanasek did just have to tack off. Again, that was a team who was winning yesterday's first race when the race had to be abandoned as the breeze died, and then unfortunately they had quite a tough second race going out to the left-hand side when there was a big, huge right-hand shift, so got hung out to dry and finished almost last. They were able to catch up 2 places to get to 7th place, but we do know we've got brand new tactician here, Ray Davies, but he is not brand new to the TP52s. He'd won the Med Cup 4 times over. He's clearly just come from winning the America's Cup as well. So we know that yesterday having to tack out early to that right-hand side was a winning move for Allegri. Tactician Andy Horton had told us after the day that they hadn't necessarily wanted to tack out right away on the starting line, but they'd been close enough to the boat that when they got flushed out to the right, they were happy with it. And I think probably that's not, as Andy was saying earlier, the way they want to go today. But again, it did work out for Allegri, that right-hand side. They were leading at the top, very close over Ron Racing, who was able to take over on the downwind. So for Brennanasek, being forced out right that early on, it might not be a game over, even though we're seeing them on the bottom of the leaderboard. But now on the top of the leaderboard, having just overtaken Provezza, is Ran Racing. But perhaps that's because we're having a GPS problem on board Provezza's boat. We did see that they were leading out to the left-hand side earlier. So maybe if Andy can hear us, Provezza still leading Ran?
Yeah, for me, I mean, the key thing just now is that Tony Ray and the Provezza team seem quite happy to drag out to the left, sailing a slightly fast boat, expecting the lift on the other tack. They seem to be happy to drag away from Ran in particular. They're not squeezing up at all, and they're actually definitely sailing into more pressure. They're just sheeting on just to take another couple of centimeters on the jib sheet. The wind pressure builds a little bit more main, and now they're starting to rise. Although, actually, to be fair, Platoon looking quite good towards the right of these guys on the left, and also actually Brennanasek probably not too bad. But say the indication just now, more pressure on this left side, and Provezza certainly pushing out to the left, happy to go a little bit quicker to get to this what they consider to be the big shift, the lefty on port, which is usually the home of this sea breeze conditions in the Bay of Palma. They're certainly separating away from Ran Racing all the time.
I like that move, Andy. If you're confident in your decision making, which often they can be in these TP52s, we have a lot of very, very strong, both tacticians, but also strategists and navigators. They all know how to sail on the Bay of Palma. They've all sailed here a lot. And I think, as you were saying, Provezza, they're just making the call to go ahead, and they wanted the left badly enough. They won the pin. But if you want the left badly enough to then just foot off towards the left-hand side, waiting for that shift, you kind of give your trimmers the ability to really lock into a faster move. And as you can tell here, that's what Tony Ray has done, the tactician on board, allowing his helm, Peter Holmberg, to work with the main trimmer, the forward trimmers, to just make the decision. I mean, you can see it here now, just in the last couple boat lengths, maybe finally getting this left shift that they're aiming for, that they're hoping for, to be able to allow them to tack and cross the fleet easily. But I almost think, I mean, to us on the tracker, Andy, it looks like they would be able to tack and cross the fleet no problem. Is that what you see?
I think that's probably the case. But I think at the moment they're just happy to dig in. The pressure is certainly stronger the further left you go. And it's always the danger that you end up overstanding. But it's always a case of just trying to work out the ley line and keep it fairly conservative. But we'll see what Preveza do. In the meantime, they're quite happy.
And then above them, a very different strategy for Ran Racing, the guys who won yesterday's race. They seem to still be able to pinch off that fleet of 3 or 4 boats above them. So instead of going into this foot mode of Preveza, it looks like Ran Racing is trying to give a hard time to the 2 boats who were often glued like glue, as they are now, Azura and Quantum Racing. And I think maybe it looks like Ran Racing's pulling it off. They've definitely gotten up onto the line of Azura. Azura, of course, trying to get onto Quantum's line. Do you think those guys can live there for much longer, Andy?
I think they can for a little bit, but not for long, I don't think. The key thing is really the battle between Azura and Quantum, and in fact Quantum tacking off. Now we'll wait and see whether Azura go with them. And indeed they do. They're just tacking now, and whether that sends Ran as well, whether that's what Ran were waiting for in turn. Platoon go also, and of course then Preveza take their moment, protect the fleet, and that sets up Ran as well.
Well, the fleet here, they're on a course of 2 nautical miles to that windward mark. You can see there's still 1.2 nautical miles left, so slightly more than halfway of this upwind left to go, and yet they are all very, very far out to that left-hand side. As you said, the question was calling that ley line, but it does look like the entire pack on the left deciding to call it early here, so there's no chance later, if the left shift comes in even further, that they'll overstand. Preveza covering Ran Racing here and has very good boat speed, 9.5 knots on this upwind, while we see Quantum Racing doing just 9 knots as they take the sterns of Ran Racing. Quantum having to do 2 tacks there, trying to stick with Azura, but I think they've decided, Terry Hutchinson maybe liking what he's seeing out on that left side. And as you can see, it looks like after that tack, Preveza and Ran Racing, after the acceleration, have gotten even a tiny bit more of a left shift. Definitely they're sailing higher angles than the boats on the far right, Sled and Allegre. So, yeah, it was a good call there, Andy.
Sure, I'll call you from the windward mark in just a second.
Excellent. Thanks, Andy. So now the current leaderboard has Preveza still in the lead after an excellent start at the pin. Ran Racing just to the leeward of them, just to the windward of them off the start line. They were able to hang the whole way. They sort of chose to lead that tack underneath Preveza, and then we are seeing both Quantum and Brunelesek in that 3rd position. So it is definitely left side heavy right now for the winners of this race. It's a very opposite situation from yesterday, where we saw the left side, the boat leading from the left, was Ran Racing, and they gained from a left-hand left-hand pressure, while on the right-hand side, Allegre, who'd been forced out early, gained from a right-hand shift. And in the end of it, those 2 boats came from completely opposite sides of the course to be exactly lined up right next to each other about 2/3 of the way up the beat. So it was kind of nothing in it whether you went for more pressure or more shift. Today, though, I think we are hearing both more pressure and more shift out on this left-hand side, is heavily favoring the boats that were able to start at the pen. Azura has just tacked back from the middle of the course towards that left side. Brunelesek just facing Azura there. I think Azura probably will be able to live. They've given them a tiny bit of breathing room, but I think everyone just deciding that the left side is strong and favorable, and if you can take one more tack up while you still have distance to that port ley line, then maybe now's a good time. Try to gain on the rest of the pack. Even Platoon here, John Kostecki's just decided to tack away from Gladiator in the middle of the course, taking one final last starboard advantage out to the left. And I think that makes sense. If you think it's going to be a typical continual left shift, then you want to be on starboard as early as possible so that when you're lifting on port, you're not sailing the header on starboard. So it means for everyone who's out there and sailing, you just always want to sail the closest direction to the mark. And everyone here, if they do think the breeze is going to continue to go left, you're happy to have that starboard tack early on. So Gladiator as well, Ed Baird there, also choosing to tack to the left-hand side. I think the teams who might lose out if we do see it continue to go left will be Sled and Allegre out on the right. Now, at the same point in time, we're seeing Sled all the way up into 5th on the leaderboard. So maybe it's just because those two boats have done less tacks than everyone else. They've only tacked the one time since the start line, whereas the rest of the fleet, I mean, we know Quantum Racing and Azura have done at least 3. Platoon and Gladiator, I think, probably the same. It's sort of that ping-pong effect, as we talked about yesterday. When you get in the middle of the pack, you can't quite decide where to go. So sometimes the guys on the side, they're favored because they've gotten to choose which side to go, but they're also favored at the top just because they've done less maneuvers. And if you think about it now, Preveza and Ron Racing, they've both only done that one tack. They went all the way out to the corner and tacked one time onto port. And now, as you can see on the line, at least for Ron Racing, a big lefty over the last 10, 15 boat lengths. Slightly smaller lefty for Preveza. I'm not sure if that means Preveza, who was sailing that deeper angle when they were out on starboard tack, maybe hasn't been able to figure out their height mode today. In fact, it looks like Ran Racing and this height mode is working out. While it showed them in the leaderboard, it was actually just a little hiccup in our GPS tracker. So Preveza still leading, and I think they will be quite happy to stay in foot mode. If you think you have your lefty coming, but you're already in front of the pack like this and you're headed towards the far ley line, there's no real need to pinch up and go slow. So Preveza here looking very comfortable in the lead. And that's helmsman Peter Holmberg. As I'm sure many of you know, he was an America's Cup helm as well. He's guided by tactician Tony Ray, and also Daniel Fong, one of the trimmers on board, has come from the Cup previously. Then underneath Ron Racing, the winners of the most recent event in Puerto Cervo. They took that momentum into a win yesterday as well. We spoke with strategist Adam Bischel after the day, and he said, you know, it is a brand new event here. It's not like we're really keeping that in mind that we won, but yeah, it's got to have a nice, you've got to know they have a nice feeling on board, having just won the most recent event and then taking the first one of the day. And now I think you can see that coming to fruition with them sitting second overall in this race. Sled has finally just tacked from the right-hand side. Allegre, though, still headed out to the right. I think we'll see them probably tack once on a ley line. That's a really difficult call to make the ley line from such a long distance away. But Andy Horton, he liked that right yesterday. They got a second in the race yesterday from having been shoved out right early. So maybe not such a bad call for Allegre just to choose. If we've only had one tack already, we'll just minimize tacks now. We'll go out to the starboard ley line early and we'll hope for the best. Preveza, Ron Racing still leading from the middle. Sled taking this time to come up the middle and check in with the rest of the fleet. And I think we can maybe take this time to check in with Andy Robertson, who's made his way to the top mark. Andy, how is the fleet shaping up for you?
Yeah, pretty much just as you're saying, Jen. We can see Preveza quite comfortable there just to windward of Ran Racing. Ran just ahead of Sled, I think it is coming back in from the right side. But it reads as I think the lift is still continuing. The furthest left you go, you can see the boats furthest out to the left are still sailing very high above the ley line. But this is looking good for Preveza and for Ran regatta leaders. Just watching a Sled coming across and crossing in front of Azura. So Sled probably not looking too bad at all.
Yeah, impressively, we have Sled all the way up to fourth
just ducking behind them. Good breeze out here now. We're probably in 10 to 11 knots. Quite overcast and cloudy over the city of Palma just now. But unusual to have this sea breeze. It's still relatively early, but it's come in quite nicely. We're getting quite a good race, quite good conditions. but Prevets are quite comfortable.
Yeah, we have Pravetsa now within 90
Booking
meter
says, the
lead.
weather under-promised and over-delivered. So I think it's Allegri coming in from the right, Jen.
Exactly. Allegri from the right, just having moved up from what we were seeing as 9th earlier to 5th now. Preveza still leading 90 meters over Van Racing, then just 40 meters back. Sled, and just behind that Allegri. So it wasn't such a bad position to be in on the far side after all, but I think maybe it was the minimizing the tax up the middle there, Andy, for Allegri and Sled.
Absolutely, and I think the key thing now is the boats further left you go, the more they kind of overstand. Allegri coming in on starboard. They're probably not going to be too bad at all. Quite choppy, really, considering the wind strength, and it is continuing to build.
What's the breeze strength now, do you think?
Sorry, say again, Jen?
What's the breeze strength for you guys now?
I think probably 11 knots, maybe 12. Interesting, though, for some reason, Allegri are not able to point as high just now as the two boats to weather, as Preveza and Ran Racing. But coming across the starboard, they force Sled to tack, and Allegri tack on top of Brunellasek. So approaching the windward mark, first time out, race 2 of the FS2 Super Series here in Puerto Portal. It is Ergen Imre's team on Preveza, round the top mark. With quite a comfortable lead at the end from Ran Racing. Ran Racing have got quite a number of boats immediately behind them. But Preveza are well ahead. In fact, they're going to be hoisted offset mark before Racing gets pretty much give or take. So I've got to squeeze up to the windward mark just underneath Sled just now. It's between Sled and Quantum for third. I think Quantum are doing a very, very nice little job there. And in fact, Sled got round in Quantum third, and Azura forced to double tack, trying to find a little space to come in, crossing in front of Platoon. A little bit of shouting there. But Ran Racing actually in the end quite a comfortable second. Sled and Quantum side by side. It's all going to be all about the hoist for them. Between the two of them, we can get the better hoist and get away. And at the moment, that looks to be Quantum. Tight out now, beautiful hoist for them. A little bit overpressed, coming straight onto the fully sheeted kite. But they turn that into some nice acceleration and move a boat length away from Sled. Allegri come round just behind Sled, then Brunellasek to the fleet, then turns for Azura. Azura fouled Platoon on the approach to the windward mark, and that really is expensive considering this is a regatta they have to sail clean. They're leading the series, the circuit, and really they didn't get involved with Platoon. They should have sailed a little bit more conservatively. They're now I think in when they went home for a they did it's just a little bit. Our prevent.
So we're just losing the tail end of Andy's transmission there, but you can hear him say Azura had to do circles. They fouled Platoon at the top mark there. Preveza, of course, in the lead. But Azura and Platoon in the lead overall for the series of the year. The 52 Super Series of the year has Azura sitting on top. with just 3 points over Platoon and then 3 points behind that Quantum Racing. So a very tough race now for Azura. They're going to have to catch back up if they want to keep this lead overall in the series. Preveza pulling out to what is now 170-meter advantage in the front, and then Ron Racing behind, doing a good solid 13 knots on this downwind. They have just a slight 100-meter lead over Quantum. And then it is a very tight fight for kind of between 3rd and 7th place. They're all within 100 meters of each other. So it's Quantum Racing at the current moment, followed by Sled, Allegre, Brenenasek, and Platoon. And as you can see, that was the fight that the teams had to go through at the starboard ley line, essentially coming through on Port Tack. A couple teams were able to just get across. I think Sled probably just barely managed to cross to get into 3rd there, and then Quantum just barely managed to tack inside of Sled and actually round in 3rd. And then the rest of the pack, the guys trying to get through, they just weren't able to. They had to do some ducks on starboard tackers there, as Azura did. They fouled Platoon, so an interesting top mark rounding. But now they set up, and it's pretty much a parade on this downwind. The first boat there to jibe out Gladiator, while Preveza still leads to the right. And I think, as we were talking about earlier, enough of a left shift that this starboard downwind is still the favored downwind. So we'll expect to see most of the teams here continuing on starboard until they get some sort of a lift that allows them to jibe back towards the gates, or until they think they've approached the ley line for the bottom marks. But when you're in a lefty, when you're on the headed tack going downwind, you're sailing closer to the bottom marks, and that's the way you want to go. Minimize distance as much as possible. Preveza extending their lead here out to 180 meters as they lead from Ron Racing and then Quantum on this first downwind of the second race of the 52 Super Series here in Puerto Portals. The trimmers on board Preveza have just rolled into a jibe. Simon Fry and Daniel Fongo, they are sharing the responsibilities of those forward sails. So the jib and, of course, the spinnaker, that's currently up. Just accelerating out of the jibe to 13.7, 13.8 knots. So really good boat speed there on Preveza. The only other boat we see doing 13.8 knots is Gladiator, the one boat that jibed out early in the back of the pack. So possibly a tiny little puff there for Ed Baird's team, helping them to gain back into the fleet from what was a last place position. Azura actually also down at the bottom of the pack as well, having to do their penalty turns at the top mark, but they've made a pretty good gain already, which is no surprise considering the Italian team is often the slickest out on the race course. They're currently leading the series overall. But we have had 4 different teams lead and win regattas so far this year. So Preveza, not one of those teams. They're going to be very happy to take this race lead. They're in fact extending over 220 meters of a lead now, 13.5 knots of boat speed as they come down to the bottom gates. They still have just less than a mile, 0.8 of a mile left to go. So just over halfway. And I like this ley line that they've called on board Preveza. They've basically said, we'll be shy if the breeze stays as it is, but if we get any sort of puff or any sort of header, I think they should lay into that bottom left-hand mark looking downwind. Tactician on board Tony Ray, but they've got navigator Nacho Postigo. He's known as the Wizard of Palma Bay. They've done a really nice job so far in this race, extending to 225 meters over Ron Racing. I think we have Andy Robertson back. Andy, I'm guessing you've set up now at the bottom mark. We're just talking about how Preveza's pulled into an even bigger lead. They've almost doubled their lead on this downwind, so they must be doing something right on board.
I think they're just pretty quick in these conditions, but they have the advantage of being out in front. And as you say, the Wizard of Palma Bay obviously doing some kind of magic as well. But they're pretty comfortable. Slightly less pressure as you come down the track towards the leeward gate. We're right alongside them. But they're in a nice, confident position. They ran, I think, perhaps under a little bit of pressure just now from the two boats behind. I think that's Sled, or well, mainly Quantum Racing. Quantum have got a bit of a gust just now as the breeze rolls down the course, the next big gust. And so just closing some distance on Ran Racing. Ran, I don't think, under any immediate threat, but that delta is closing progressively. And that breeze now comes down to hit Preveza. Preveza bow lifts very slightly, go just a little bit quicker. They're still, I think, on a straight into this leeward gate, where you'd imagine they'll then go back out to the left, just become the one-way Palma track.
The one-sided race course Andy calling for would mean Preveza will choose to jibe and head right turn to the right-hand mark, and I think that probably looks like a really good call now with a relatively steady sea breeze, although Andy's telling us that it's continuing to build out there, which is a good sign. Yesterday about this time we were still postponed waiting for the race start, and then at 2 o'clock we actually had the first start, but the breeze died about 2:30 and we had to abandon the race. So to have a solid sea breeze now that's building is a very, very welcoming thought, especially for the fleet here, because Palma's so known for its steady, solid sea breeze. I mean, there's weather forecast studies that are done here just on how a sea breeze scenario works, and we've got this mountain range behind us, a valley in between that allows the breeze normally to funnel really well. But this morning, when Andy was asking Nacho Postigo about why we didn't see the sea breeze through yesterday, he blamed it on the clouds. He blamed it on it being too cloudy for what we would typically expect of Palma in the summertime. So now that we've got the sun out, it's looking like it's gorgeous conditions out there, and Preveza really enjoying it, extending up to 330 meters into the lead.
That's right, they're just coming into the gate just now. They've got about 60 meters to go, something like that. Nice set up for the drop, under no pressure whatsoever. And Preveza have done well on the Bay of Palma before, but also they've got to the closing stages of the regatta and struggled, as have Platoon. It's also been the graveyard for a number of boats in the last day, but Preveza doing nicely just now as they come round the leeward gate. That big lead, as you said, they've really opened out on Ran Racing. Come round in a gust, heel slightly, settle down very nicely. Big Guy Reid doing the powerhouse grinding at the back of the boat just now. As the crew set up on the rail, we now have back in about 12.5 knots of breeze, something like that, at the leeward mark. Still coming down, as I say, in these gusts and these bands of breeze, and then it's lighter, so it's not all sweetness and light. There are some lulls. The Quantum have done well down this run, got clear of the boats they were with, principally Sled and Allegre. Allegre, a little bit of a messy jibe, but so Ran Racing coming round the left-hand mark, looking upwind, holding the kite very late, virtue of the string drops. Nice drop for them, nice wide rounding coming in and tight on the way out. I'm saying that they've still got a lot of kite in the foredeck, but they are well clear as the next boat goes round, which is Quantum on the right-hand mark, jibing at the mark, being pursued by Sled. That opens the door on this left side to Allegre. Allegre have Brunina Seca on their transom. Platoon on the right-hand mark, looking upwind. Brunina Seca pushing, pressing Allegre hard. And then coming in behind them are Gladiator and Azura. Then Azura, winners here in 2015, but they fouled the Platoon at the top mark and had to do their turns. And that has cost them substantially, especially in this one-sided, one-way track. It'll be very, very hard to get back into a meaningful point-scoring position, really.
So as Andy said, the racetrack so far very much a one-sided track on that first upwind, allowing Preveza and Ran Racing to get out to the lead. But Ran Racing just not able to run away from the pack the way that Preveza has done. Ran Racing only with a 50-meter lead over Quantum and Sled, whereas Preveza has a 300-meter lead over the entire fleet. But strangely, I thought there it was the choice of Quantum Racing and Terry Hutchinson. They had the opportunity, Andy, at one point to jibe for what we thought was the favored mark, the left-hand side, and yet instead they chose to cross the entire fleet to jibe, clearly wanting the right-hand mark. And I'm not sure, is there anything that you see, Andy, that would mean why Quantum wanted that right-hand mark instead?
No, I think that there's possibly a little bit of early right for them just now. They seem to be sailing quite a high angle, even relative to Sleds, are only 50, 60 metres to leeward. There sometimes is that early right coming off the line or where the start line would normally be. You see that from time to time. But in general, it's a case of getting it to the left, up towards Cabo Blanco, this big high bluff cliff peninsula or promontory out to the left. That's what generates the lefty. And that's really where you generally want to get to on this bay. And that's what Tony Ray and Nacho Postigo and the guys on Prevets are. That's going back out that side. But I think maybe just a case of Quantum trying to do something different, get a little bit of separation from the pack around them. They're certainly not doing too badly relative to Sled and Allegre, but not being able to do any damage to Ran Racing. But for sure, Ran not able to. Ran just don't seem to have the upward pace that Preveza do.
Yeah, they seem to be sailing in different mode. I mean, Preveza, the first upwind, very much so had that footing mode, as you said. They were so confident in that left-hand corner. They just sent it from the pin out to the left side, tacked across the fleet, and that's it for the win. And then Ron Racing instead very much sailing a higher mode on that first upwind. At the time, I think we thought it was to be able to pinch off Azura and Quantum Racing in the fleet above them.
I think it was for sure at the time.
Yeah, but no, for sure here we're seeing their track equally high as last time, and yet there's not really that group above them that they can affect. So is it just different helming styles? Instead on Preveza, the driver Peter Holmberg, the helmsman, versus Ron Racing's Nicholas Zenstrom, they like to sail the boats a little bit differently.
I think there's a little bit of righty coming, just looking at the way that the rest of the fleet is setting up. In particular, Bredenesek going way out to that right side. Obviously, they want to try something a little bit different, get some separation. But I think in general, I mean, you would expect the sea breeze to move right over the course of the day. So there may be some of that, but for the moment, Preveza still a little bit of traveller down, just a little bit of twist in the main, just because it's quite brisk now, 15 knots. So it's pretty physical, tough upwind just now, quite a bit of chop. But they really are still opening distance. But as you say, they're not sailing any kind of high mode compared to the boats behind them.
No, and then in the back of the pack, the melee here from Quantum through to probably even Gladiator, if not Azura. It's still a very tight fight. The amount of distance between Preveza and Ron Racing, 220 meters, that's more than the amount of distance between Ron Racing and the last place team, the 9th place team. So a very close battle for everyone else, while Preveza, the team that's owned by Ergen Imre but helmed by America's Cup winner Peter Holmberg, they are just taking off as they're getting to about the halfway point on the second upwind, the final upwind of the first race today. Instead, the middle of the pack, it's Bredenesek far right. Gladiators just ducked them to go even further right. Then in the middle, Allegre, Platoon, Quantum, Sled, and Azura. Ron Racing a tiny bit further in the lead and a tiny bit quicker at the moment. Quantum sitting third on our scoreline as we speak, with Sled a very, very close fourth, and then Platoon and Bredenesek fighting it out for who can be 5th place above Allegre and Gladiator.
And that's Preveza just tacked. Just, I think, a little bit under ley line, but all the boats to the right, and I think they're just keeping the loose cover on the fleet. It's keeping.
I think the next interesting move will be to see whether Ran Racing decides to go underneath Provezza here, or whether they decide they want even more left and go past. I think this is kind of the pivotal moment for them on board, whether you continue to cover the fleet behind, which I think would be staying on starboard tack all the way further to the ley line, or whether you tack underneath Provezza, hoping maybe for more of a righty later on. This is a difficult task for tactician Adrian Stead to make the decision, but it's made easier by the fact that the left-hand side has paid off so much earlier on today. And apologies to you guys watching. As you can see, our tracker just has a bit of problems with Provezza every now and then, so we can pretty much guarantee to you that they are still leading even when we do see them stop on the tracker. I'm sure Andy will bust in and let us know if anything major happens, but when that orange line takes a little dip and stops for a second, it's just we're having some connection issues with that boat today. Luckily, they've got such a lead for us now that it's not too much of an issue when it happens. We can relatively guarantee that they are still winning the race. The Turkish boat on board, they're leading from the Swedish Ron Racing, and that was the turning point, the question mark for this upwind, and Ron has decided to go past their line. They'll keep going further out to the left-hand side, making the decision a bit closer to the ley line, just to see if maybe they can make a small gain, and that's their decision point there. Ron Racing going for the tack as we speak. So strategist Adam Bischel and tactician Adrian Stead saying, here's our spot, Nicholas, let's go for it. Just 200 meters back from Provezza. Still leading Quantum in third, but a very tight battle for Quantum and Sled. Quantum has also just tacked. They've tacked underneath Ron Racing, and I think we understand that Quantum likes the right a bit more than the rest of the pack. We saw them round the right-hand side at the bottom mark when most of the fleet picked the left. We're just seeing them tacking underneath Ron to go to the right-hand side, allowing Sled to get to the left. So I think Terry Hutchinson a bit more comfortable in the right than everyone else, but also a bit easier there than sailing behind Ron's line, accepting that bad air, even if it's only the bad air of one boat. By tacking underneath, you're not actually having to sail in their bad air at all. And interestingly, they've sailed pretty much exactly on the same line as Provezza, so deciding that that's the right line to choose, which might make it a bit harder if they get a bigger right-hand shift. They could even possibly be in the tiniest bit of bad air from Provezza, but I think probably it's windy enough now the bad air wouldn't go that far with such a huge lead for Provezza. It's out to 230 meters now. The question, of course, this big right side gamble for Brunanasek and Gladiator, will that pay off? And it looks like Gladiator, at least, is paying off. They were sitting last as they rounded the bottom marks. They are now up to 6th place, so they've gained both Allegre and Azura. Azura, of course, had to do penalty turns at the top mark. Brunanasek as well, catching up to 6th. I think they were only sitting about 7th, though, so they haven't made huge moves, but they could continue to make big moves as they still have a lot of leverage over Platoon and Azura, a lot of distance spread across the course. I think we would assume we could see Brunanasek tacking and lee bowing going out to the right, and yet, oh, no, I'm not sure. They're crossing Allegra here, so they've taken their right gamble early, and they're deciding that was it. Now it's time to consolidate to the fleet. It's going to be difficult for them then to decide where to tack with Azura, Sled, and Quantum coming back across. So the next pivotal moment for Brunanasek, for the new to this 52 Super Series year, the new tactician on board, Ray Davies. He's stepping in for Morgan Larson, who was busy racing offshore in the Transpac race. But as we said, they had an amazing first race yesterday and then just didn't quite get the call right in the second race. Ray knew he wanted the left, and they went for the left, and then unfortunately a big righty came in and it didn't quite work out for them, although it did work out for Ron Racing from the left yesterday, who actually did win the race. So just very small margins out there. As everyone knows, it's one tiny mistake that can either win or lose this race. It's just about one boat length call that might be the problem between first and last, especially that first top mark. And Brunanasek deciding to go all the way through the fleet here. So he's gone for the right gamble early, and now it is to the left side hard, so maybe all the way to the left lay line if they're not tacking early underneath Sled and Quantum's lines here, and they're not. So I'm not sure if not to doubt Ray Davies' tactical skills, but he is definitely crossing the sterns of 4 boats and taking 4 boats bad air. So I think he has to really believe strongly in that left-hand side to make that call, and obviously he does. At least he's crossing behind 3 boats. They might have a lead over Gladiator there, but of course that allows you to come in at the top mark on port tack right at the end, and that makes it a little bit easier to choose when to tack on that starboard lay line. And maybe then if you get a small advantage, you can then tack in front of boats that you might have been behind earlier. So Ray Davies, he was actually covering Platoon there. Platoon had tacked out underneath. So John Kostecki also liking the farthest left moment to come back through, whereas Allegre and Gladiator and Azura, they picked more the middle of the line. So I think the interesting battle is they get to the top. It'll be Allegre and Brunelesek, who were close to each other on the right-hand side earlier. Which of those 2 boats has benefited and profited the most? Whether Brunelesek's able to use that left-hand side and get way back into the fleet, or whether where they were with Allegre earlier was good. And I think maybe right now we're seeing where they've gone to the left is great. Again, the race course led now by Preveza, who've gained out to a 300-meter lead. They were just at 200 at the bottom marks. We'll soon hear from Andy Robertson as he gets back up to the top mark. And we can see the Turkish boat coming in around the top mark in the lead. In second place, Ron Racing. They had the lead yesterday all the way around the race course after having jibed early and over the top of Allegre just around the first mark and the first offset mark. So the Swedish boat pretty much on fire, having won the last event in Puerto Cervo, having won the first race here, and now sitting second in the second race. An exceptional job for that team. And then in third, a very tight battle, as we've said. Quantum Racing still leading that tight battle. And its owner, driver Doug DeVos, back on board again here. He was racing with the team in Puerto Cervo. He is racing here with tactician Terry Hutchinson, and then their strategist who steps in as helm when Doug is gone, Bora Galari. He's left for the Moth Worlds in Lake Garda. He's a 2-time Moth World champion. He's trying to make it 3 times, and instead we've had Michele Evaldi step back on board that boat, and they are just very, very closely holding off Sled for that 3rd place spot. Then it's Brunelesek and Platoon from the left, Azura and Gladiator and Allegre fighting in the middle. But we've got Andy Robertson on the line now. Andy Robertson at the top mark, Preveza in the lead.
That's right, Preveza just made their tack final approach on starboard coming to the mark. Nice comfortable lead, as no doubt you've said, and also Quantum Racing just holding on to a Sled on the port tack approach. Ran Racing still pretty comfortable in front of them, you'd have to think. But here come Preveza to the top mark last time up in this first race of the day, second race of the series here in Puerto Portals. And I think possibly as much as anything, Preveza powered by the desire to come back after that disappointment on the last day in Puerto.
We've just slightly lost Andy's.
Oh,
we've got him back now. Keep going, Andy. We lost you there for a second.
Sorry, I was just saying Preveza, as much as anything, powered by the desire to come back after their disappointment in Puerto Cervo when they had the chance to win the regatta, when the shackle opened or failed, lost the downhaul, couldn't cheat on the kite, but this will be a win and will take them up the leaderboard a bit, but that Ran Racing will strengthen their lead on the second place. Quantum holding off Sled quite nicely. They're just about to make their tack at the windward mark, and it's quite busy. The fleet is quite compact coming in on port. There's Ran Racing then at the top mark, coming away as Preveza are already 120 meters away from the offset mark, charging downwind. We have 15-16 knots of great conditions ahead of So on the forecast, Azura have managed to get themselves back into the back of the fleet, challenging Platoon and Gladiator a little bit. Them then with fourth yesterday and third just now, pretty steady. And Sled also a little bit of an up and down season, but solid just now. And Brunelesek, disappointing yesterday. Actually, this time Platoon have had to do turns. Didn't see the incident, but they're just on turns to windward of Azura and Gladiator. So that's cost them some distance. In the meantime, Brunelesek going quite nicely and have some distance on Gladiator. Just watching the hoist on Brunelesek. Kite goes up straight onto it. Vladimir Lobomarov. They're in a nice gust. The bow comes up very nicely. A little bit of weight back and charging downwind. Great final run. That not sure what's going on at all with Platoon just now.
Yeah, we saw them do one turn, Andy, and now we're seeing them do another turn there. What? I guess you're saying you don't know what's going on, but this is crazy.
To do more than one turn.
Have they been flagged by the umpires, or are those self-decided?
So that's dropped them right back out the back door. So, Jen, we're going to charge down and get to Prevetta, and we'll speak to you from the finish line.
Excellent. Thanks, Andy. So, unfortunately, you guys were not quite sure what happened with Platoon there. I do think they probably fouled as they were coming across on port tack. We said that they had chosen earlier to go for that very tight port tack ley line, and that sometimes it is a gain because you can just sneak in at the weather mark, but sometimes it's a loss because as this happens, you're a port tacker with a starboard tack fleet coming at you, and if there's no space in there and you try to get through anyway, then you end up having to do at least one penalty. In this case, they did two, so I'm not sure if it was two separate incidents. If they maybe hit the mark after having spun their first penalty, we'll have to ask John Kostecki later on what happened there. But it's Preveza in the lead with almost a 400-meter advantage. And again, after that, from second to eighth place, only 400 meters. So a really impressive race win coming up here for the Turkish team. Behind them, then, the battle still very, very tight. Ron Racing leading that battle from Quantum Racing. Sled, Brunelesek, Gladiator, Azura, and Allegre in that order. And again, it's another parade as we have spoken about this left-hand side of the race course looking upwind, the right-hand side looking downwind, being quite favored both for angle and for pressure. And I think it's really difficult for the fleet to decide to jibe off of that. I mean, you almost think Platoon might make a gamble and jibe away because they're so far back anyway, but it doesn't even look like tactician John Kostecki is ready to make that decision here. And that's a hard one to face when you're having to just follow the pack in front of you in that way. Allegre as well, not having the best race here. They're in second to last after having a great first race yesterday where they got second. They had liked the right side yesterday and had gone out to the right-hand side. It had worked for them, but today they tried the right-hand side on the first upwind, and you can see it just wasn't quite in their favor. The rest of the pack here, many of them coming through the middle left on that first upwind, and I think that's why we see such a tight battle still. It paid off going far left. That's why Preveza and Ran are leading. But then everyone else in the middle, they sort of get ping-ponged around a little bit, and then that's the pack for the rest of the race, and that's the pack led by Quantum Racing, over Sled, Brunelesek, and Gladiator. And then the overall season leaders, the series leaders, Azura, the Italian team, they had to do penalty turns at the very first top mark. They had been really in the hunt and kind of right next to Quantum, sitting about third or fourth, halfway up the beat, but they just got stuck out on port tack with starboard tackers coming in on the top mark, and they had fouled. In fact, at the moment, it was Platoon that they fouled on the first upwind. Platoon, of course, as we just said, did some penalty terms for fouling at that top mark. So a very tight fleet there. And now as they come in towards the finish line, the lead for Preveza still. But Quantum has jibed out early as well. Preveza jibed more closer to the finish line lay lines, they'll probably only have to do one further jibe unless they get a small right shift. They'll be able to lay the finish line. But Quantum Racing jibing early, so maybe trying to make some final moves here on Ron Racing. Perhaps if they're able to get a shift in their advantage at the end, the shift that would help them would be a left shift, basically. Quantum still definitely needs to do one final jibe. So Quantum actually hoping at this point they get a lefty. They're then able to jibe down across the top of Ron Racing and have more time on that starboard tack. So the question there, if Quantum can get that left shift to help them out to get into second place, or if Ron Racing will be able to keep that second place, while Preveza very clearly leading still down the bottom of the course. We have Andy Robertson. Andy, how's it looking for the guys on Preveza?
Looking pretty sweet for them just now. Under no pressure whatsoever. But as you called it, Jen, just watching the jibe now from Quantum Racing. See how they come out of the jibe. They've had nice pressure the last 2 or 3 minutes down that run. Certainly, possibly a little bit more pressure than Ran. They're now converging with Ran and Sled. Ran have got quite a nice low line just now, quite a direct line. But I'll have to leave you to call that when we're pretty much almost at the finish line, just watching Preveza. But once again, the breeze drops as you come down the track, as you get towards the finish line, towards City of Palma.
Well, this is a very close, it is
really
a close battle.
Quite unexpected as far as the forecasts we saw early in the day. We're all still talking about the northwesterly. This is a nice solid sea breeze. It's 10 past 2. You'd imagine we should roll straight into a second race.
Andy, that battle just happened, the Quantum and Sled battle. Quantum came down, I think, decided instead to jibe on Sled's breeze, so trying to slow down Sled a bit more, maybe even have one final attack at Ron later on when they jibe across. For now, they are definitely rolling over the top of Sled a little bit. We could see Quantum doing 14 knots, Sled only doing 13, so a difficult decision not to cross early on at that point in time, especially when they had starboard advantage. They could have crossed, but no, I think they've decided they want to just go out for one more hit. And maybe, as you said, they had a tiny bit more pressure out on that side of the course?
Yep, possibly. I think that Ran actually probably got the best pressure where they are now. We're quite a distance away, but Quantum looked very slightly slowed now, just at this very minute. We're down at the finish line waiting for Preveza. Preveza still going quickly.
So on the tracker right now, you guys were just not quite seeing Ron, but about 30 seconds ago, they were just underneath Quantum Racing and Sled, and they probably still sit second. It was second to Ron Racing, then third Quantum and Sled. So yeah, we'll let Andy paint the picture of where Ron Racing is, as their tracker has completely disappeared from sight over the last minute. It's like the Bermuda Triangle out there for Ron Racing, the guys who won yesterday's race and are second now. But Andy will let us know if anything happens with Quantum and Sled and Ron. For now, Quantum has just made bigger moves over Sled. Still, though, a slim margin, a 10-meter margin for Quantum and Sled. And then the question mark, whether Bremenisek can get in from the leeward side, from the right-hand side. We are seeing them at the current moment in third over Quantum. Bremenisek gaining from this little personal battle between Quantum and Sled, and of course Ron Racing back now on the leaderboard, clearly in that second place, no questions about it. But what do you think, Andy, between the third place, the podium position, Bremenisek, Quantum, or Sled? Difficult one.
I like the position of the angle that Bremenisek have. Bremenisek have got good pressure down there, sailing quite fast and more directly towards the line for me just now. We're directly to leeward of them, albeit about a quarter to half a mile away from them. But as you're talking about the positioning of Ran are directly in front and to leeward of Quantum, and Ran are just jibing at the same time as Quantum. Well, Quantum actually just lost her kite momentarily, just flogged for a second. which is a bit strange, but they have it back under control very, very quickly. But in the meantime, Provezza coming through the finish line in the next 15 seconds for a nice win for them. Led off the pin end of the line, led out to the left, completely Palma Bay blueprint, followed to the letter, and a good win for Provezza, for the team that flies the flag of Turkey. And it'll be Ran will be next, and for sure Brunelesek have got right up to Quantum. They're jibing it inside them right now. Doug DeVos pulls the bow down, sails more directly towards the finish line. I think that from there, Brunelesek for sure. In fact, they'll probably both have to put in another jibe, or whether Brunelesek are just being held up a little bit by Quantum. Could be close though, but no mistake in the second places. The team which led the regatta yesterday, won yesterday. Nicholas Enstrom's Ran Racing coming through the finish line just very, very shortly. The bow is down. They're sailing a nice deep angle through the line, and they will take second place to extend their lead at the top of the table. Quantum Racing just ahead of Brunelesek have got a really nice gust, really, really fortuitous gust, and roll over the top of Quantum. Terry Hutchison will not be liking that at all. And also Sled are quite nice in this right-hand corner looking downwind. Coming in on starboard jibe. Brunelesek, Vladimir Loborov's got the bow down. They're just going to actually roll into a jibe for some reason. It's going to be a little bit slow for them. They need to get the kite sheeted on. They're going to lose out to Brunelesek, to Sled. Sled actually get it. Sled coming through now. And nicely Takashi Akura and the team. And actually, Brunelesek may just lose out to Quantum. That's too close to call for me. Not quite sure why Brunelesek put in that last jibe. They really lost speed. But we'll see how that pans out on the final standings. And in fact, Azure have done quite nicely down this run as well. They've got through Gladiator and Allegri behind the platoon who took that penalty at the top mark. So a pretty exciting finish after Provezza and Ran. These positions, I think, were never really in doubt. Then I think Sled sneaks it on the finish line, and then it's anyone's call between Brunelesek and Quantum.
We couldn't even call it from here, Andy. We were seeing them both crossing the finish line at the exact same time. I mean, even the bowsprits and the virtualized crossing the finish line at the same time. So we'll have to wait for PRO Maria Trejo on that one.
Okay, good. Anyway, Jen, that's a great win for Provezza. And as I say, Ran Racing solidifying, strengthening their position at the top of the table, and should roll straight into another race.
Thanks so much, Andy, for that one. So you guys watching, that was Provezza, the Turkish team, taking their first win of this regatta, the second race of the 52 Super Series Puerto sailing week. Then in second place, the Swedish team Ran Racing, who won yesterday's race. They will definitely be sitting at the top of the leaderboard after those two scores. Third place was Sled. They had a deeper race yesterday, so a third place, a great spot for this team. Yesterday they had finished 8th, so moving up quickly. Quantum in 4th. That's 2 4th places now for Quantum Racing. Brunelesek in 5th. Happier probably than their 7th yesterday. But remember, that's a question mark actually for now. Those are just provisional scores between Quantum and Brunelesek because it was such a very tight battle between those two as they crossed the line. We're going to have to wait to hear confirmation from Maria Trejo as to who she actually called across the line first. Then Azura, the Italian team, who was 3rd yesterday, finishing 6th here. Actually quite a good comeback from being last after doing penalty turns on the first upwind, the first weather mark. Then Gladiator with a 7th place. A tough regatta so far for Ed Bayard, who finished 9th yesterday. Allegre with an 8th place, swapping their 2nd yesterday for an 8th place, will not make Andy Horton or anyone on board that boat very happy. And Platoon, again, a tough day for John Kostecki. They had been at least in about 5th position, and they fouled at the top mark, and you saw they actually had to do 2 penalty turns. So now our projected points, and again, keep in mind, Quantum and Brunelesek, these are question marks, the 5th and 6th there, but provisional ranking so far has Ran Racing leading these scores, and that is not a question mark. First and second in the regatta means they are definitely sitting atop overall. Preveza with a 6-1, giving them 7 points. They will definitely be in second place. The question, though, quantum racing, whether they have a fourth and a fourth or a fourth and a fifth. If they were fourth and fifth, they'd be sitting on 9 points and tied with Azura, and Azura would be leading that tiebreak. Azura would be in third, but as is right now, we've provisionally scored them as fourth, leading just over the series leaders, Azura. Rounding out the scoreboard then, Allegre, Sled, Brennenisek, Platoon, and Gladiator. As Andy was telling us, it is great breeze out there. It doesn't look to be shifting at all, so we should assume Maria Terreo will be going right back into the second race very shortly. We will take a quick little break here, as I can just confirm to you that the scores were, as we have shown them, quantum led from Brennenisek. So this is the scoreboard as it stands, and we will be back soon with race 2 of the day, race 3 of the regatta. Bienvenidos de nuevo and welcome back to Puerto Charles, the Bay of Palma, and the Mediterranean Sea. We are now about to be into the third race of the Puerto Charles 52 Super Series Sailing Week. The overall scores currently led by Ron Racing, the winners of the most recent event in Puerto Cervo as well. Preveza just took the last race, now sits second on the leaderboard, while Quantum Racing are third, and Azura, who are leading the series overall, sit in fourth place. Out on the water, we have Andy Robertson, the head of PR and communications for the 52 Super Series. Andy, how is the weather looking for the second race of today?
Well, the conditions are much the same as we saw just pre-start for the previous race. We've got a breeze of around about 11 to 12 knots. It's possibly very slightly lighter. The breeze is slightly more to the left than it was at the previous start. Still quite choppy and bouncy out here. You do get that in the afternoon in this sea breeze. Looking at the start line, I can see that a race officer committee boat with a little bit of bias to her end of the line, to the right end of the line, just to give some incentive to the fleet to start more towards that side, knowing that this is such a left-hand bias. So that's quite interesting to see how that plays out. And certainly the way the fleet is setting up just now, then the majority of the pack are towards the right, towards the committee boat end of the line. We can see Azura and Quantum furthest to the right along with the sled. Allegra looking like they'll pitch for this end. Andy Soriano, Andy Horton. Meantime, also more towards the left and just take a little hitch up to windward just to protect on the boats behind them is Vladimir Lomovarov and on the Brennasek. That's 1 minute to go. So Brennasek well forward on the fleet just now, but pretty much stopped, just going forward very, very slightly. So we are on the end of the line. We're just watching, and in fact the boat comes down. Brennasek dip down below the line, back. It should come forward with pace in the final seconds.
So you could hear Andy there saying they're all
going forward with Ran Racing to windward of them. Just into the final seconds. Allegri running down the runway to the pin end and pull the trigger. Now Ran Racing are well forward there. General recall, yeah. General recall. Thought that was going to happen. We had 2 or 3 boats over. Ran Racing were the boat that took them forward, I think. So we're in a general recall. Everybody will carry on up the beach just for a couple of minutes probably, and then we'll start to see boats bailing out. We're going to go back into another start.
So as you could hear there from Andy, that was a 2-horn on the race committee, a general recall. As you could tell, the boats all bunched up at the committee boat end of the line. Andy said Maria Torrio had favored that end, especially because the left-hand side of the race course has been so favored today in this sea breeze direction. But a general recall in order, as I couldn't tell which boats were over early, and we will come back to you shortly before the next start. It sounds like it won't be too long. She'll just call the fleet back down and start again soon. Well, we are back with the start of the third race, a restart. Of course, we just had a general recall out there on the water. PRO Maria Terreo saying that she couldn't see all the boats over. It was a huge bunch up at the committee boat end of the line. Andy Robertson just beforehand had told us that the committee boat end was quite favored. The left-hand side of the course, of course, the favored side on the front race, on the first race of the day. It was leaders Provetza from the left right of the pin and Ron Racing just above them. Those were the top two the entire race, the first race. So she's now favored the starboard end of the line just a touch, the committee boat end of the line. And, of course, we then saw what was a general recall in the first section of this race. But we have Andy Robertson out on the water. Andy, how is it looking to set up for the second start of this race?
Yeah, very similar to what we saw in that recalled race. Not quite as much bias just now. The course axe has been changed very slightly. As in terms of the setup of the fleet, just now we're seeing Gladiator, Ed Baird sending Gladiator up towards the pin end along with Allegra and Platoon. 4 boats up from the left end is Ran Racing along with Quantum. Now in the middle of the line this time of Provetza are bow forward on everyone just now. And then above them Azura. Sled are up there as well, and Bernanosek seems to favour starting up on that side. Bernanosek and Azura, we can see their bows now. So the final seconds is all about the speed build off the line. Quantum are moving forward on Ran. Ran just look a little bit shy of the fleet. Bear in mind they pulled the fleet forward last time. It's going to be all about the final speed build, all about the speed off the line in this one. And the bow comes down on the Gladiator first. Gladiator have the runway directly towards the boat. This could be good for them. The gun is gone. Very, very good start from Ran Racing if they're not recalled. But actually the pace off the line is that of the Gladiator. Gladiator in a way really, really nicely. They have the 4 or 5 seconds of speed build of runway directly pointing at the boat. And then slingshot off the line. That's done them nicely. Allegra also have a very good start. Next boat up. Then Platoon. Then it's Ran Racing. Quantum Racing. Provetza. Sled and Bernanosek. Everybody on starboard just now. And it's this drag race to the left. Ran Racing moving forward on Quantum. Quantum not quite got the pace of the fleet right now. I think they're being hurt by the boat, the weather. Not sure exactly who that is. You can see them now, and that is the Provetza. So the bow is coming down on Quantum. Quantum in dirty air just now. And I think they're going to have to clear their air, get out of there. Bernanosek once again not able to live where they were. And they have to tack out. So Quantum go as well. Quantum tack on to port, a little bit slow for the tack, very bouncy, very bumpy in the as they cross the wakes of the boats to weather. Now then on this left side, and Gladiator going well, but Allegra a little bit quicker. Platoon have a better start this time. The previous starts, this regatta so far have not been so good.
You know, Andy, I'm so impressed that no one was called over early there. To us, it looked like Platoon.
Push out to the air. And
unfortunately, it sounds like we did just lose Andy right at the end there. So I was just saying, I was really impressed to see that nobody looked over early. It was to our eye on the virtual eye, it just barely looked like 3 or 4 of the boats might have been over, and I think, in fact, they were probably just clear right at the 0. So to me, it was Platoon, Azura, and I think at the time maybe it was Bernanosek as well that were question marks. But as you can see now, no one has been called over. It's Azura leading from the middle of the line. Just a very slim margin of a lead over Sled, just to leeward of them. Then Provetza, 2 boats further down the line, as well as Platoon Gladiator. But it is still very, very tight. As you can see, all 9 boats within 70 meters of each other. So while Azura leads from the center of the pack, I don't know that we can claim that, especially as we know the left-hand side has been quite favored. And the right side, of course, Quantum and Brunellasek both were forced to tack out early. Quantum was squeezed out between 2 boats. They had Ron Racing, current regatta leaders, just to leeward of them. They weren't able to live there. They had to tack out, and Brunellasek the same. So coming in from the far right, which might be an advantage if we see the sea breeze going right later in the day. Far left, of course, is Gladiator, then Allegre, then Platoon. Then in the middle there, Ron Racing is just now squeezing off Provezza. Those two were fighting for the lead last race, but it was pretty much Provezza the whole time. But now they've been squeezed off at the moment. They're tacking off. They'll sail behind Sled and Azura out to that right-hand side. And the question, I guess, will be whether they come back underneath Quantum Racing and Brunellasek or not. But I think we have Andy Robertson back on the line. Andy, you guys with the left-hand side of the course here, how's it looking?
Yeah, we're right underneath Gladiator on this left side of the course. We're at the beam of Gladiator. Now they're a drag race racing directly against Alex. It's always that fine balance where they keep their pace as much as possible and try to gradually squeeze up to Allegra's line. Allegra is sailing a high mode, also trying to get up to Platoon, who are next to Weather. And in the meantime, as you said, Jen, Provezza forced to tack out to the right to clear their line. They were progressively squeezed to Weather by Sled and Platoon, and they couldn't live there. And Platoon tacked off. Sorry, Platoon still going, but it's actually Sled who have tacked off. So we're now left with 4 boats on this left side. And I think Azura probably still have the slight advantage, Jen.
Yeah, we're seeing Azura still with a 4 meter, so a very, very slim advantage over Brunellasek from the right. So a little bit of a righty, maybe some extra speed helping Brunellasek out there. Ron Racing also on the podium at the current moment, 13 meters behind. So they're from the middle there. They're right next to Azura. But Provezza crossing out to the right-hand side. It looks to me like they're about to they're face-planting Quantum. So they couldn't quite cross Brunellasek. They didn't want to take their stern. So Provezza forcing Quantum into attack, forcing Quantum even further to that right-hand side. But Brunellasek not looking too bad from the right there at the moment. Showing a third overall.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of rotation to the right, just looking at Azura. Now, if you look at the angles that Azura and Gladiator are sailing, now I'm not sure to what extent Gladiator has to bow down slightly, or whether there is, let's say, a little bit of right-hander to Weather off them. But for me, Azura looked pretty strong. Gladiator a little bit lower, sailing faster towards this left side. We can just see them setting up, I think. Actually, they're just very slight ease as they punch out to the left side. I think they're just keeping things fast. Platoon and Allegre on port. How are they looking on the group to the right there, Jen? Platoon and Allegre in particular. I mean, they seem to be quite high on port.
Yeah, very high on port. I mean, for us, it's got about 5 boats right now between Quantum, Brunellasek, Platoon, Ron Racing, and Allegre, all within 5 meters of each other. So it's too hard for the computer to tell at the current moment. Well, the computer's telling, but I don't know if I believe it, whether those spots lie as they lie. From the right, it looks like Provezza and Brunellasek coming back across. In fact, Platoon just there across Provezza, I think look like they are lee bowing Brunellasek, so perhaps they couldn't actually cross Brunellasek, didn't think they were able to. From the left, it looks to me like Allegre might get across all 3 of those boats, but we'll wait another couple seconds to make sure that they can cross there. If that is the case, then that would have Azura in the lead, 30 meters ahead of Sled on the far right in second place. Ron Racing, though, just about tied with Sled. They're both 31, 32 meters behind Azura. So the question there, whether Ron from the left or Sled from the right will be taking those second and third positions. Then Allegre, almost equal tied as well now. They did just cross Provezza and Platoon. Brunelesec tacked underneath, so they were able to be to windward of Brunelesec. So a very, very, very tight battle there between second all the way down to fifth place. Was now seeing Gladiator, who are far left. Earlier, you were talking about Gladiator, but we were on Virtual Eye, we were seeing them in ninth place overall. So it looks like maybe a slight bit more pressure there, Andy, that's helped Gladiator come up the leaderboard from ninth to fifth.
I think it changes all the time. Gladiator look good momentarily. They seem to get their bow up and rise in a bit of a lefty, but at the moment they're bow down, getting a little bit of a header and not looking so good on Platoon and the boats coming towards them, in particular Provezza. And in fact, as you said, the boat furthest out to the right, I think, which is Sled, they're close with Azura as they converge just now. So Platoon tack and Gladiator, I think, Provezza attack as well inside Gladiator. And in the meantime, Sled coming across from the right. Allegre cross Sled and tack. And at the same time, Azura will cross Allegre. So Azura still looking quite strong. I think probably a small lead overall in the water.
So interestingly, as Andy just said, the scoreboard changing all the time. We're seeing Gladiator jumping up into second place as well. So maybe the lefty finally paying off just a tiny bit more, but it's unclear.
You do find the lefty increases as you get up the track, as you get closer to the source of the lefty, if you like, the Cabo Blanco up to the left, and as you get further up the track towards it, then it does kick in, becomes stronger as you get up. And so that's what Ed Baird is looking for. Also, just to lure off them Provezza, the winners of the previous race. It's a pretty brisk breeze, 13, 14 knots. Quite overcast, quite unsummer-like just now, really.
It's surprising because that's what Nacho said this morning was the reason that the sea breeze hadn't come in yesterday was this cloudy weather. It cleared out for a little while, middle of the day. But yeah, as you're saying, clouds coming back over quite a bit colder than we were expecting earlier on, making for interesting racing out there. But this is still very much the sea breeze direction, right, Andy?
Absolutely, yeah. You do get the breeze when the clouds roll back and you get some sunshine. But just now, quite dark clouds over the hills at the back of Palm. Yeah, interesting. Somebody's just gone in for a turn, or that's Allegre of Suzzle pouring off. I don't know whether there's no penalty, but Allegre doing a turn. Nothing they've done in the last couple of minutes. Chuck behind at the leeward of Provezza.
We're just trying to look into that scenario with Allegre to see maybe who we saw them foul. It looked like it was possibly Ron Racing, that they were to windward of Ron and just didn't quite keep clear, so then had to, I think, go into a penalty turn like that. It's, at least in their tracks, it looks like the white track was to windward of the yellow track and then got a little too close. That's what on our eyes it looks like.
But it wasn't something they'd done in the last minute or two. It was obviously a penalty they were carrying and chose to do it then, perhaps. I'm not sure. Yeah. Anyway, Sled not looking too bad at all out in that right side. Got a good lane, nice clear wind pressure. And for me, Gladiator dropping back relative to the boat towards down to the middle of the course. Jen, we're going to head up to windward mark and we'll catch you again in a couple of minutes.
Thanks, Andy. So as Andy was saying, there's Sled just taking over that secondary spot on the leaderboard. Azura from the middle, but Sled out on the right-hand side doing very well indeed. Although 75 meters back from Azura, so Azura has extended that lead, which earlier was only about 30 meters. Then a tight battle for third place. Brnenisek and Gladiator swapping on the leaderboard here. Brnenisek, of course, the furthest right boat on your screen, the dark blue if you're watching with us on YouTube. And then on the far left is Gladiator with that dark red, that maroon colored path. So interesting to see at the top mark which of those two sides actually plays out, whether it be Sled and Brnenisek in for second and third, or whether there might be some sort of a top lefty that'll help both Gladiator, and also just underneath Gladiator is Provetza and Platoon. And then, of course, in the middle there, the neon green Quantum Racing. They could always get in the mix. They're quite a fast team on board. Of course, lots of excellent sail decisions being made about trimming all the time. And Doug DeVos, the owner helm, does a great job on board the helm. And Ron Racing up there as well, actually showing Ron in second place, just to windward of Azura's line. Ron having a fabulous regatta so far with a win, then a second place in the first race of the day today, and now what looks like it could easily be another second place. So coming off of their Puerto win, their win in the most recent regatta, they are looking very strong and seem to be sailing the boat very comfortably. A team that we talked about a lot yesterday because they were winning the race yesterday until much later in the race, kind of the top weather mark when they got rolled by Ron Racing on the inside, but that's Allegra. They had a very difficult time in Puerto Cervo. They broke their mast and then had to bring their spare mast, get the boat and their spare mast all set up with new rigging and two new sails, their mainsail and their J2. And then they came out yesterday and they crushed it. They had a bad start, but got out to the right-hand side, led around the top mark. So I think, as we were speaking with Andy Horton, their reward to their shore team for an entire full month of labor to get the boat ready and rig-tuned well, to be racing well here, to be leading off the line and leading at the first top mark. That was Allegra. Unfortunately, though, a tough situation here for them fouling Ran Racing and having to do a penalty, and that's why we see Allegra deep in the back of the pack now. Out on the right-hand side, the boat's about to tack for Leyline, Sled, and Brnenisek. That will then allow us to see how they shape up with Quantum Racing, Gladiator, and Ron in the middle of the pack. Azura still, of course, out in the lead, the Italian boat. Okay, really interesting scenario there. Azura, we think, called probably the proper ley line. Azura tacking right on what we have called a ley line on Virtual Eye, but Sled and Brnenisek miles past that ley line call. So I'm not sure who makes that decision on board Sled, whether it's Hamish Pepper on tactics, Cameron Dunn on strategy, or someone else who is saying when they should tack, and yet it looks like possibly they've overstood the ley line by quite a lot, and that'll be a big mistake, I think, for them. We've got Andy Robertson back now. Andy, we were just talking about how Sled has forced Brnenisek out way past the ley line there, and I think that might even lose them 4 boats that they were fighting with in the middle. It should have been Sled and Brnenisek sort of fighting with Gladiator, Platoon, Quantum Racing, but they've overstood by probably a solid 5 boat lengths, now reaching into the top mark.
Yeah, indeed. Dead right. They're coming in, losing 4 or 5 boats because, of course, it's so compact on the Port ley line. They're losing 3 or 4 boats, but Azura ripping away from the windward mark in first place. Ran Racing regatta leaders up in second, having a great regatta so far. Gladiator a nice beat and get up to third. And then I think Sled are just behind the Gladiator. Brnenisek side by side with Quantum. Quantum a little bit squeezed for breeze just now in the lower lane. And getting some dirty air. So slowed just now from dirty air in particular from Brnenisek. But the fleet is still quite compact with the exception of Allegra. Allegra having to do that turn and really wonder whether they've got a problem. They're very slow at the moment, getting upwind. But in the meantime, Azura coming back after that disappointment in the previous race. He had a penalty turn at the top mark first time up, and that cost him a lot of time, a lot of distance, and they're on the back foot from there. But in the meantime, so they're leading from Ran Racing. Gladiator up there in third, pulling away nicely from Sled. Sled just settling after their hoist. Then Brunellasek and Quantum side by side. So we'll see how this race pans out, the same way as the previous one, where Provezza managed to build up a big lead, and Azura seemed to be doing the same kind of thing, sailing away just now from Ran Racing. But I'm sure if Nicholas Sennstrom went ashore with 2 second places today, he'd be pretty happy. Provezza, who won the previous race, are in that pack behind Brunellasek and Quantum just now. Remember, they actually had quite a good start, and then they were bounced out to the right early. Haven't really been able to impose themselves, get back into the top 3, top 4 since then. In fact, they're just allured of Quantum, and may have jibed, or either that or in a very low line. Did you manage to see anything about what happened with Allegra, Jen?
No, the only thought process we had was just looking at the lines in the water behind them, and it looked like their line as the windward line had gotten very close to Ron Racing. So I'm not sure if maybe Ron had been in their jib, blocked by their jib for a long period of time, and they just couldn't hang or something. But it looked like they should have tacked off much sooner, and instead they then fouled them as the weather boat and then had to spin. But I'm not sure why. You said they looked to be quite slow after that. I'm not sure what that problem is for them, whether they couldn't catch back up afterwards. But yeah, they're deep in the pack now. They're 300 meters behind the next closest boat, which is Provezza, and there's only 300 meters from Provezza to the current leaders, Azura. Azura pulling out into a really nice lead here, Andy. They have about 110 meters now. They've got almost 14.5 knots of boat speed, 15 knots of boat. It's a really good puff right as we start talking about their boat speed for Azura, whereas behind Ron Racing and Gladiator doing about 12 knots. 11 and 12s only just now. Gladiator getting into the 14. So Azura extending their lead all the time, and some pressure out there on the left.
That's right. They're just a gust's going to roll down, and they decide to jibe with it, stay with the pressure. Gus was rolling down inside them slightly, and a bit of a dark cloud above them. They're just on the edge of that dark cloud. I think that's what's giving them the breeze just now. So they jibe to the left. Ran Racing, Ado Stead, and Adam Bischel quite happy to stay with the right just now. There's no immediate urge for them to follow. Then Gladiator in third, and then it's very busy in this little compact group between fourth and seventh. Really, a lot of move and counter move as the boats to the right try to roll over, and then you can see Brunellasek just jagging up slightly to protect against Quantum, for example. And so Provezza then roll into their jibe, as do Brunellasek. Now, Brunellasek seem to have a problem. They just have a man on the bow to Brunellasek. There's someone on the bow just trying to start out their attack, I think. May not be able to jibe immediately. Interestingly enough, then, as we said, Azura went across, jibed on the pressure, stayed with the gust, but since then they've come back onto starboard. Just, I think, sailing the shifts as they get them, as much as anything, perhaps.
It's kind of nice to watch that ley line battle call the question marks as to whether you jibe really early like Preveza and see if you can make those gains over Quantum Racing and Ron Racing and Vernonasek. And actually, at the current moment, it looks like Preveza has made some major gains by being the early jiber. But of course, later on, they're going to have to sail deeper down towards the marks and probably for sure will have to jibe at least one more time. The rest of the fleet, though, Brennenneset coming the furthest out to this right-hand corner on the downwind. They're going to try to come in hot to that bottom ley line, not have to do one more jibe, or at least do it really late, which is a similar tactic to sled. So the two boats that had picked the right-hand side on the upwind, now picking the opposite side, the right-hand side on the downwind, which is quite interesting. And I think, unfortunately, it's been a bit of a loss for Brennenneset. Go ahead, Andy.
It's interesting because quite often you see the same kind of strategists from the same strategists and tactician players. You quite often see Hamish Pepper happy to hold to the right, come in on the hot ley line into the mark. So too, memory serves me rightly, and Ray Davis likes that on the Brennenneset. But we quite often see that certainly from Hamish and the sled guys, quite happy to stay right down the down the run, sail with the pressure, and then come in the hot ley line with speed. We saw that, if you remember, in the finish of the previous race, and that's what got them a couple of places on the finish line.
I think it's a good strategy, too. I mean, you can see the middle of the pack here. Gladiator, Platoon, Quantum. There's a lot of boats giving a lot of bad air, even Preveza to windward of those three. So if you're deciding, like Hamish Pepper and like Ray Davies on Brennenneset, if you're deciding to come in hot and late, what you're trying to do ultimately is just to stay out of that pack, stay out of that cloud of bad air that the other guys have. And I think Andy mentioned it. It worked out really, really well just at the finish line last time for at least Brennenneset, who caught up from about 7th to somewhere like 5th. I think they were 5th, just behind Quantum Racing, but almost tying them across the line. Here, though, still a very tight battle in the middle, but it's Gladiator who's pulling out over Platoon, and then Quantum sort of being left in their gas a little bit there, Andy.
Yeah, a little bit. Interesting, we've just got this kind of cloud activity going on, this big dark cloud over Palma in particular, the right of the race course. Definitely a little bit more pressure down this right side where Brennenneset and sled are. The breeze building up quite nicely for this last part of this run. We're going to head down to the gate, Jen. I'll speak to you from there in a second.
Thanks, Andy. So as the fleet sails down towards the first bottom marks of this second race of the day, the third race of the regatta, you can see they only have 570 meters to go. Azura with quite a comfortable lead now, 130-meter lead over Ron Racing, the Swedish boat. Ron Racing having performed very well so far in this regatta. They got a first yesterday, a second in the first race of today, and they're coming down in second right now. So Nicholas Zenstrom and the guys on board Ron Racing will be very happy with how they've been performing, and I think if they can hold this second, which it looks at the current moment like they will, then they'll have a great scoreline so far. The scoreline as is, Ron Racing on 3 points overall. Preveza, who took the last race win, now on 7 points with the 6th from yesterday. Quantum Racing just behind on 8 with 4 and 4. Azura on 9 with a 3 and a 6, and Allegre on 10. It actually just continues down 1 point each time. 10, 11, 12, Sled on 11, Brennenneset on 12, and then to Platoon and Gladiator. So very tight for everyone from second to essentially 7th place, just 5 places behind. And of course, we're only on to day 2 here of the Puerto sailing week. So very tight racing, but Azura hadn't had the best races so far. A 3 and a 6 had them sitting 4th on the leaderboard. So at first, we'll definitely give them a big jump up. But they are leading the season overall, and their closest rivals in the season, Platoon, not having such great races here. They got a 5th in the first race yesterday, a 9th in the first race today, and they're sitting just about 5th again right now. So John Kostecki not quite in phase with the Bay of Palma's conditions. Today it's a sea breeze, but yesterday really tricky scenario. And as they get into the bottom marks, we have Andy Robertson again down at the bottom marks with Azura.
That's right, Azura just coming through the gate just now. As you said, I think Platoon not really firing in all cylinders at the moment. They had that penalty turn in the previous race. That's what really cost them their couple of places at the time, dropped them back to 9th. Anyway, Ran Racing really do have this regatta by the scruff of the neck just now, coming round in 2nd again. This time they're chasing Azura, but they have Gladiator some distance behind. And watchwords for Ran Racing just now, really just keep it tight, keep close with Azura. If the opportunity comes, then well and good, but they're well clear of Gladiator and the battles that are going on behind. Gladiator, I think, possibly thinking about this left-hand mark, looking upwind, perhaps, possibly, maybe. Lure drop. And then it's very busy behind. Very busy indeed. But Sled leading the group in. Sled are going to come to this left-hand mark looking upwind. So Gladiator going well. They're well clear of the melee behind. Sled a little bit untidy in their drop, a little bit at sixes and sevens as they come round the mark now. A little bit more pace round the mark than Platoon, who are on the right-hand mark looking upwind. And then we have Bruninasek coming down inside Quantum Racing, holding the kite late. And that forces Quantum round to the right-hand mark. Nice rounding in the end from the Bruninasek. That will get them ahead, certainly, of Quantum up this beat. Should give them a small advantage over Quantum. Quantum just at the mark now, just chasing Prevetsa as the Bruninasek guys get settled onto the rail. And then Allegri coming in some distance behind the back markers or the next boats. In fact, Quantum looking like 8th position on the water just now, Jen.
Yeah, I'm really surprised by that bottom mark running there as well. It really looked like Quantum were setting up to go towards the right mark, right turn, head to the left-hand side of the course. And then, as you said, last minute forced out by Bruninasek. But that was a long distance to sail back to the opposite side. I think that was probably ultimately a loss. I would have just rather seen them slow down a little and follow Bruninasek around that left-hand side marker.
I mean, you look at the leverage that Bruninasek have got now out to the left. If the breeze goes left as expected, then they should gain significantly over the right. But still good breeze. We've still got 12, 13 knots at this leeward gate as we leave the leeward gate. And Azura just consolidating. Ran Racing staying in phase with them, staying out of their dirty air. And I think they're just going to work progressively to the left towards the Port Tatley line. And they really do have quite a nice jump on the fleet. Sled further out to the left. The Gladiator punching furthest to the left just now.
So on board Azura, it is skipper and helmsman Guillermo Parada, then tactician Vasco Vescoto, and navigator Bruno Zerilli, and they have pulled out now to 140-meter lead, a pretty decent-sized lead. It wasn't as big as the lead that Ron Racing had in the first race today. Ron Racing, of course, taking that race by over 300, 400 meters. Sorry, Prevetsa taking that race. The Turkish team taking that race over Ron Racing. But Ron now sitting 120 meters behind Azura. Nicholas Enstrom, the driver on board Ron, Adrian Stead, the tactician, and Adam Bischel, the strategist, along with Steve Hales and navigation. They've done a really good job here so far in Puerto Portals. They've been first, and now scoring 2 seconds. But from the left-hand side, it does look like Gladiator is making some big moves as well.
Yeah, Gladiator making a little bit of a gain on this left side. Nice lefty. Getting back at Ran Racing a little bit, just closing some distance.
And again, apologies. online, we've had some issues with our tracker for Ron Racing today. So as you can tell, every now and then they stop on the tracker. Andy will let us know if anything drastic happens and the boat does stop out there, but they are still sitting second, although Gladiator making a couple moves from the left-hand side, but I think it'll probably still be Ron Racing lead as those two come together.
Yeah, they're just coming together just now, Jen, but I think Ron Racing have lost a bit to Gladiator for sure, but then they're just going to come across and tack on them. I think they'll just come another 10 meters. In fact, there they go, just tacking on Gladiator. But look how much Gladiator have closed up. I think you said it was 110, 115 meters a while ago, and now it's probably closer to 30 or 40. However, Gladiator's tack is not so good. They bounce into a couple of big waves, which they slows them down significantly. Having to build pace. In fact, it's got a little bit lighter just on this left side momentarily. Still get these holes in the breeze.
Yeah, it's interesting to see Gladiator coming back to the left and then Ran Racing going back to the right-hand side there, digging in for more.
Exactly the same thing why Ran Racing don't stay with them, having just lost 70 or 80 meters to them. You'd think they would possibly come back, but maybe they're just happy with doing their own thing, and perhaps a little bit of a lefty just now. Certainly in the last 20 seconds have come bow up. However, in the lead at the moment, then Azura just make their tack. Back onto port, just keeping it nice and tight. Keeping an eye on the fleet to the right. Not pushing too far to the left when they don't need to. Let's just keep an eye on Gladiator and Ran Racing, see whether Gladiator pull back a few more meters coming out to this left side after being bounced out by Ran. Maybe Ran feel that their bigger threat is from Platoon, but certainly they're going over towards Platoon and the thing. I don't think they'll go too far. And then looking as I am just now, Azura, certainly in a left phase breeze, lifting significantly in the lefty. Now that would be worrying me if I was Ran, because you would imagine that's what Ed Baird's looking for, and indeed Gladiator roll into their attack right now.
And yet on the far side, Ron Racing rolling into their attack as well. So it's almost like the two of them are playing opposite shifts, and I don't know that this is advantage Gladiator yet. In fact, on the virtual eye, it's showing that a slight loss to Gladiator. So yeah, maybe as you said, Ron Racing just taking a lefty across there, playing the shifts instead of playing out to that left-hand side as Ed Baird and Gladiator is.
Yeah, no, it's certainly not. Actually, just looking at Gladiator now, I think there's more right where Platoon and the guys coming across on starboard are just now. Anyway, we've got a little bit to go up to the windward mark, and I'll catch you from there in just a couple of minutes.
Thanks so much, Andy. So Andy Robertson heading up to the weather mark, and I think as we're seeing on our leaderboard, Platoon, in fact, overtaking Gladiator there. So the being bounced out to the left-hand side by Gladiator was hurtful. Sorry, by Ron Racing was hurtful for Gladiator. So losing out a little bit on the other red-flagged boat on board our YouTube. Platoon getting up into that third place position, but it is very, very tight, as you can see, just 10 meters between Platoon and Gladiator, who are just behind Ran Racing, and of course the leaders still Azura. I think, unfortunately, Azura having a bit of the same tracker issues that we're having on Ran Racing. Every now and then they're just slowing down for a second, but of course that's only a tracker problem. They're still leading out in the front, and they are, as we've said, leading the series overall. The Italian team, one of only two teams to ever have won the 52 Super Series. The Italians have won it twice, while Quantum Racing have won it 3 times. Quantum Racing winners last year, and they were winners here of this regatta last year, but so far they've suffered in the racing here with 2 fourths and currently are sitting 7th in this race. I think actually we could say that 2 of their fourths have been better on the finish line than they were at points during the race. So sitting 7th overall for Quantum doesn't necessarily mean that they'll finish this race in 7th, especially since it is so close in front of them. It's just 60 meters up to that 4th place position. And as we all know, it gets very tight around the top marks, and anything can happen on these upwinds, although the downwinds have been a bit more of a parade. That left-hand side of the race course ultimately showing to be quite a spot that most of the teams like on this race course, and they kind of all sail directly out of the mark down to that left-hand corner and jibe for the finish line there. But as it is right now, it's Azura having tacked up towards the top mark. I think that's probably their last port tack that we'll see for a while until they get nearer the ley lines. They are on a tiny bit of a left shift lift, it looks to me like, whereas Preveza down underneath looks like they've just gotten a huge righty. Maybe they're just trying for a higher mode, trying to give Quantum some bad air, although Quantum are probably 6 or 7 boat lengths behind. But it is a really, really tight battle here between those 3 or 4 boats for second place. Gladiator from the left, Ron Racing right now not on our tracker, so probably still it is second place with Ron Racing. So Gladiator from the left for third. Platoon from the right for third, just 10 meters behind, and Preveza from the middle also for third, but I do think Gladiator will be crossing Preveza quite easily. So it looks like about 50 meters of a lead from Gladiator over Preveza. These, of course, the projected points table, considering the 2 first races which have finished, and then the possible current places of the second race. However, it doesn't count our Ron Racing. We're not showing them on the course because their tracker's not working, but we are showing where we think they are in position wise, and that is second, we think, on the race course now. And again, we've said Andy will absolutely tell us if something happens out there to Ron. Otherwise, we think pretty easily they are second place there, which makes them first place overall, still on only 5 points if they finish this race in second place. And that would then put Azura with a race win up into second on 10 points. So the series leaders moving into second place if they win this race, and it looks at the moment to be like that will be an easy task. They have a 200-meter lead over Ron Racing. The Italian team's such a slick operation as well. They don't often give up a lead that large. Third on the leaderboard overall with the projected points as they are now in this race would be Preveza with a race win this morning and current 5th place. But it is very tight between Gladiator, even Ron Racing, and all the way down to Brennanasek, Quantum, and Sled in 8th place. So 2nd to 8th, I don't think we can make any of the same decisions that we can make about Azura probably taking this lead. At the current moment, we're showing Ron 2nd, Gladiator 3rd, Platoon and Preveza fighting very close behind, and then Brennanasek with new tactician on board this week, Ray Davies, although he has won 4 Audi Med Cup series before in the TP52, so he is no stranger to being a tactician on board these boats. But I think he's really excited to be back on them now, especially as he said, the boats, the crews, and the setups on the boats at the current moment are so slick now that it makes it easier for him as a tactician to make calls. Especially, he was talking yesterday about the call at the bottom gate and which gate you want. With the string drops now, it's so much easier to make that call much later on and to still have a perfect drop and an easy side decision made there. So the guys from the left now, Azura, we did see them just do one small starboard tack out to the left-hand side. Then behind them, Gladiator, Platoon, and Preveza pretty much all on, I bet, their final port tack approach. Just behind them as well, set up higher, Quantum and Sled. And then still middle right of the race course, Brennanasek and Allegre, the British flag boat here. Unfortunately had that small error on the first upwind where they had to do a penalty, and they just have not been able to get back into the pack. Platoon, however, seems to be pulling into this second, third place position. I think Platoon, at least in Scarlino, sort of known for having bad starts and making their way back through the pack. And maybe it looks a little bit now like they've done that if they've moved up into what we see as possibly third or fourth place here. We've got Andy back on the line. Andy, I was just talking about Platoon moving their way up through the fleet here, fighting very tight fight at the current moment, at least on our virtual eye, with Gladiator.
That's right. I think Gladiator probably have a slight advantage being to windward and dictating the ley line into the top mark. But at the moment, Azura are just approaching the windward mark for the final time with a big lead. In the meantime, Ran Racing have been kind of sucked a little bit back into the pack. They're really not that far away from Gladiator. Gladiator have this windward position, really. We'll have to, I think, ease sheets very slightly, just overstood very slightly, and they will compress with Platoon. But in the meantime, Quantum a little bit out of touch with Gladiator, and they have Sled behind them. There's still these two boats way out to the right, well, not way out to the right, but to the right, and they are Brennesek and Allegre.
So unfortunately, Andy, we're still having tracker problems with Ran Racing.
Then,
so
between Gladiator and Platoon a little bit quicker just now. Meantime, Azura then come round this offset mark and heading for home. And I mean home, the Bay of Palma really is home for the Azura team. The boat lives here in Portals itself. And they are kite up and heading downwind as Ran Racing approaches the windward mark. And indeed, as you said, Jen, Platoon get round the inside of Gladiator, make their tack now, and will come round in third. So things looking a little bit better this time for Harmuller Screer and his team. Remember, we have the other wizard of Palma Bay on board, and that is Jordi Calafat. Grew up here. I think he did all his sailing on the Bay of Palma when he was a nipper. And they seem to have done a pretty good job up that beat, coming round in third. And I believe it's 25 years this week since Jordi started that Olympic regatta in Barcelona and won Olympic gold. And John Kostecki, I don't know if you heard in the press conference, local press conference last Thursday, was saying that Jordi's not shy of reminding him about his Olympic gold medal.
That's awesome.
Anyway, Ed Baird on the Gladiator, just giving chase. Not quite as good a hoist. Took a few seconds for the kite to open out, and they're settling, but acceleration now for Gladiator. They lose a few more meters to Platoon in front. Nice set from Provezza, though. Provezza very slick at that top mark. They can give chase and try and get up to Gladiator, but for them, or for everyone, with, I suppose, almost except the Ran Racing, Azura, a distant dot, becoming ever smaller on their horizon. And Allegra chasing round in the back. So we're going to have to give chase ourselves, Jen, to get down to the finish line and see Azura coming through. You'd imagine on course to win this race, second race of the day. Ran Racing, you would consider have a good chance of holding off the fleet behind them for second place. But I'm just going to drop the line and speak to you very shortly.
Thanks, Andy. The only thing there, we don't actually have Ran Racing on the tracker, so we will have Andy keeping us informed about them. But as he just said, they will look to hold on to that second place position. It's a very similar setup for the team as the first race of today, where Provezza got away from them and Ran Racing very, very comfortably led the rest of the pack, but it was a tight second place. So I think they're probably quite comfortable doing the same here. We don't see them on the tracker, unfortunately. You can even see that their tracker stopped them on the upwind, but that will be sorted out, of course, for tomorrow. For the leaders of the overall regatta, which is currently going to be Ran Racing if they keep this second place, or even if they get anywhere up to seventh, they should then lead from Azura, the Italian team, who are leading this series overall. Azura just rolling into their jibe there on the downwind. Ran Racing, of course, in second, that we're not seeing. And then a very tight fight between Platoon, Gladiator, and Provezza for who will be third place. It looks like, at the moment, quite a procession, and Platoon is going to be very happy that John Kostecki pulled those moves on the upwind to move them up from about 5th or 6th, I think, to what is now third place. He's very good at choosing shifts like that. They won the Scarlino event, in fact, from what were often not very good starts at all, and then just picking their way, picking their moments through the pack, through the fleet. And that's one of the reasons John Kostecki is kind of the only person in the world to have the triple crown of sailing, an Olympic medal, America's Cup win, and a Volvo Ocean Race win under his belt. But as Andy was just telling us, Jordy Calafat makes fun of him a little bit because John Kostecki's medal is not gold, and Jordy's is gold, and it was 25 years ago today that the Barcelona Olympics started, where Jordy won that gold medal in the 470. So Azura leading from the right. They have jibed. The rest of the pack have not jibed except for Alegre in the back. I like this. Alegre rolling the dice, trying to hope for something that might get them back into the mix. And I think we can hope on their behalf that that does happen so that they can catch up a little bit. They're still 200 meters behind the next closest boat, but their boat speed about the same, if not slightly better than Quantum's in the middle of the pack. So maybe the one time that being out of the pack helps them just by giving them a little bit better pressure as well. Azura still leading. They've jibed back out to this left-hand side. As we've been speaking about earlier today, the left-hand side often quite favored in this sea breeze direction. They've now jibed back. So that might have just been a consolidating jibe a little bit there. They're now set up in kind of the perfect defensive situation here when you're to windward and front, to leeward and in front of the boats that you're trying to beat. And that's what they've currently just done. They took a little protective hitch down to protect against the finish line. It's still 1 nautical mile or 0.9 of a nautical mile left to go to the finish. So just about halfway down the line, you can see the majority of the rest of this downwind they'll have to do on port tack because they hung out on that starboard tack so far so early to try to get out into the left-hand side. And Azura doing the best speeds of the fleet aside from Alegre. So Alegre splitting from everyone else, gaining out there on that right-hand side, looking upwind, possibly in just slightly better pressure than the rest of the pack, but still about 150 meters to go. Earlier it was as far as 400 meters behind. So this is good moves for Alegre, good moves for Andy Horton, rolling the dice and going out into that right-hand side. Brennensek as well, splitting from the rest of the pack, splitting down into this left corner, this bottom left corner, just like they did on the last downwind and the downwind before that, which was the final downwind of that first race of today. And it worked out the 2 previous times, I think, for them. So Ray Davies may be deciding he wants to be hot into that corner one more time just to see if they can get ahead of Quantum, Provezza, and Platoon. I think right now it shows them in 4th, but just keep in mind that Ron Racing is sailing along out there on the race course, and unfortunately we don't have the tracker working on their boat, so they are in 2nd place ahead of Platoon and Gladiator. And my guess would be that they're about in the mix with those boats in the middle, but we'll have to absolutely wait to hear from Andy to confirm where Ron is and whether they've been able to hold on to that 2nd place. Another little battle in the back there is between Sled and Quantum. Quantum currently leading that battle to leeward, just able to maintain their advantage from Sled. And I think we do have Andy Robertson back on board. And we were just telling the audience, Andy, that we still can't see Ron Racing on their tracker. My assumption that they're still in 2nd place, probably in the mix between Azura and Platoon, but you can let us know.
Absolutely, yeah. We are just setting up at the finish line, but Ron Racing still pretty solid in 2nd as far as we can see. It's some distance off, but last thing that we saw, they were in a good solid 2nd. Azura way out in front. And one more jibe, I think, to get down through the finish line. This is really not a good Quantum Racing, though.
No, and also for sled, a bummer.
A decent enough start and go their way.
A bummer again, I think, for sled. For sled as well, they were rounding the first top mark in kind of what should have been third. We were talking about how they had overstood the ley line and pushed Brennanesek out, but they did still round in that third position the first time. But they've dropped on that second upwind down to 8th place overall. So sled not being able to manage this race course as effectively as the rest of the teams, unfortunately. Andy, I'm not quite sure what's going on there. Maybe they just liked that life.
Interesting this time in particular. Down this run, remember we said before about these two in particular on the right coming downwind. Now, Brennanesek have done the same thing just now and look very, very slow, or relatively slow compared to the pack to the left. And similarly, I think the same thing for sled. I think it is who are out on that right side. More pressure middle left of the track. But things do always get a bit more variable later on in the day in this wind direction. And in fact, actually, really, Azura not moving very quickly. They're moving nicely, but breeze has eased slightly. Yeah, so in position of Ranner directly to leeward of Gladiators, the kite and the finish line, then Ranner about 100 metres to leeward, and a good solid second, as I said. Azura then, Vasco Voscoto makes the call for the jibe, heading towards this boy end of the line, I think.
Well, I like that my guess of where Ron Racing would be is where you've just described them to be. So to the audience, the way that we're looking at this, the two red boats out to the right-hand side, Platoon and Gladiator, Azura in the middle coming towards the finish, Ron Racing just between them, solidly in second. But is Azura coming into that finish line with the lead, Andy, the Italian team?
Absolutely. They're only 30 metres from the finish line, bow number 2. And let's say on their home waters, really, fly the flag of the yacht off Coast Esmeralda. But the boat is based here, and they won here 2 years ago en route to the 2015 title. And there the gun goes. A little measure of relief, I think, more than any particular jubilation or jumping around. Particularly after the previous race when they made that foul. I think it was Platoon, wasn't it, at the top mark, and had to take their penalty, dropped off the back of the fleet, came back into it a little bit. Meantime, Iran Racing ran, I think, a little bit high on the boy end of the line just now. I think they'll roll down progressively, sail a bit deeper to get through the line, not under any threat from the boats behind. Keep the bow round, please, to the right.
Well, Rand decided to just show up on our tracker now, so we actually do have the yellow boat back in play. But I agree completely, as you said, a little bit too high. They'll have to jibe.
Keep the bow round.
Maybe they won't have to jibe to the finish line, but possibly.
No, they're just going to pull the bow down and just drift through the line under no pressure. Now, Brennanesek coming in with some pace down from that right side, looking downwind, pointing pretty much at the Gladiator. Now, this is what they did last time, and they just got squeezed out. Now, they're not getting much of a runway into the boy end of the line, though that's their problem as they jibe in front of the Quantum. Really need a bit of a squirt, a bit of a gust, a bit of acceleration to get down there. They're getting that. But is Platoon coming through the line next? Can Brennanesek get down and through Gladiator this time? Can be close. And interestingly enough, this time Quantum have to jibe. Gladiator will get there, but Brennanesek get through next. Going to be close on the boy, actually. But this time, the little ploy works for them. Anyway, Quantum through next, then Pravetta, then the sled. Now, as you said, I think they were up in third early on, were they not? So to get across in 8th is going to be a bit of a disappointment to Hamish Pepper. And then Allegra, another 60, 70 metres behind, will come through in 9th. So, top of the table after today, same as it was yesterday with a bigger lead, though, is Ran Racing. Two different winners today in Preveza and Azura. And overall, though, really good racing in this sea breeze conditions. 12 to 16, 17 knots of breeze. And what a great day's racing, Jen.
Thanks so much, Andy. Yeah, as the race comes to a close here, the second race of the second day of the Puerto Patel's 52 Super Series sailing week, it is Ron Racing at the top of the leaderboard with a 1-2-2, giving them only 5 points overall. Azura, the Italian team, current series leaders, with a 3-6-1 sitting on 10 points, and Preveza, we believe, getting 7th across the line there. It was a very tight battle for those final 3 or 4 spots around 5th to 8th. So we're guessing Preveza with the 7th. We'll have those provisionals up on our website. We will get them confirmed, but that puts them on 14 points, tied with Quantum Racing on 14 points, if that was a 6th place for Quantum across the line there. Then Platoon and Brunelesek tied on 17 points for 5th place, and Alegre and Sled tied on 19 points for 7th place. So a very, very tight battle on the Bay of Palma for the entire fleet of 9 teams here who are racing for the 5th event of the 52 Super Series of 2017. And they are going to enjoy quite a fun party as well tonight. That's a lot of what Puerto Portales is all about, the nightlife, the shoreside fun, and I think they've also been able to give us some waterside fun as well today. Racing again tomorrow starts at 1 p.m. Tomorrow will be televised with live pictures from the water as well as virtual eye tracking. I will be out on the water tomorrow. Andy Robertson will be in here in the studio. But for now, that's it from us today. And again, these scores are provisional, so check in with our website, with our Twitter or our Facebook to make sure that your favorite team is in the position we've said they are. Otherwise, join us tomorrow for excellent racing again.